Hi everyone. Okay, I never thought I would say this, but I have to. This is a crazy journey, and it involves my mother-in-law, Carol. That's not her real name, but I'll call her that in this story to avoid any further problems with her. When I first met my wife, Sarah, Carol was wonderful. Seriously. She was such a sweet, quiet woman who always had a fresh pot of coffee when I came in. She never gave unsolicited advice, never criticized my work, I work in IT, and seemed genuinely happy that her daughter had found someone who made her smile. When Sarah and I got engaged, Carol cried with joy and hugged me tightly, whispering, "Welcome to the family." I felt like I had hit the jackpot as a mother-in-law. My own parents are wonderful, but they live on the other side of the country, so having a mother figure around was nice. The first year of our marriage was perfect. Carol would sometimes bring a casserole, but she would just leave it on the porch with a nice note. She never lingered too long. I had no complaints. But I didn't foresee the storm coming. The changes were so slow, so subtle, that by the time I realized what was happening, my marriage was on life support. The first red flag was so small I almost missed it. Sarah and I had just gotten back from a weekend trip. We'd left in a bit of a hurry, and I'd asked Carol to please water our plants while we were away. She happily agreed. When we got home, everything seemed fine. But a couple days later, Sarah mentioned offhand that her favorite succulent in the kitchen looked a little worse for wear. I didn't think much of it. Then, that evening, Carol called. I answered on speakerphone while Sarah and I were making dinner. After the usual pleasantries, Carol said, "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry about your little cactus thing. I know you told me not to overwater it, but I just thought it looked so thirsty. My fault entirely." I was confused. I hadn't told her anything of the sort. My instructions were just, "The plants need a good drink." I laughed it off and said, "No worries, Carol, it's just a plant." But I caught the look on Sarah's face, a tiny flicker of doubt. It was the first time Carol's version of events didn't quite line up with mine, and she framed it like she was apologizing for my specific, overly complicated instruction. It was weird. But I brushed it off. Everyone misspeaks sometimes, right? After the plant incident, things started to get strange. It was never anything big, just little comments that always seemed to paint me in a slightly negative light. I'd get home from work, and Sarah would say, "Mom said she called you about picking up her prescription today. She said you sounded really annoyed." But Carol hadn't called me. Not once. Or I'd fixed a leaky faucet in the guest bathroom, and Carol would tell Sarah, "It's so nice he tried, but a real plumber will probably have to come redo it. He seemed a bit overwhelmed by it." I hadn't been overwhelmed. I'd fixed it perfectly in 20 minutes. The worst part was the tone. It was always delivered with this veneer of concern. "I'm just worried he's taking on too much." Or, "I don't think he meant to be short with me, dear." It created this invisible wedge. Sarah, who adored her mom, would gently ask me if I was stressed at work, if I was sure about the faucet, reminding me it was okay to ask for help. I started feeling like I was constantly having to defend my own mood and competence in my own home. The sweet, unobtrusive mom was slowly being replaced by a subtle saboteur. The first major event was the Great Red Wine Incident. We had Carol over for dinner. I was grilling steaks, Sarah made a fantastic salad, and I'd picked out a nice bottle of Cabernet. Everything was going well. I poured us all a glass. At one point, Carol reached for the salt and somehow knocked her full glass over. It went everywhere, all over the white tablecloth, her light-colored blouse, the floor. It was a genuine accident. I jumped up, grabbed a bunch of cloth napkins, and started sopping it up, saying, "No worries, Carol, accidents happen. We've got club soda, it'll come right out." I was being nice. I really was. I helped her blot her shirt, got her a new one of Sarah's to change into, and we all laughed it off. Or so I thought. The next day, Sarah was quiet. Finally, she asked, "Why were you so short with my mom last night?" I was baffled. She explained that Carol had called her that morning. According to Carol, I had slammed the napkins down on the table and sighed heavily with visible frustration, before barking that I'd get the club soda. She said I made her feel like a clumsy burden. My heart just sank. It was such a blatant, detailed lie. I told Sarah exactly what happened, my tone, my words. Sarah got defensive. She's not a liar. Why would she make that up? Maybe you didn't realize how you came off. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just misspeaking. This was a campaign. And my wife was already on her side. After the wine incident, a coldness settled in. Sarah wasn't outright angry, but she was distant. She'd pull away when I tried to hug her, and our conversations became purely functional, about bills, groceries, schedules. It felt like I was living with a polite roommate. I tried to talk to her about it, about her mom, but she'd shut it down. I don't want to be in the middle of this, she'd say. You two just need to get along. The problem was, we weren't not getting along. From Sarah's perspective, her kind mother was just occasionally reporting my minor, stressed-out rudeness, and I was the one making it a big deal by getting defensive. Carol, meanwhile, was sweetness itself to my face. She'd show up with baked goods, ask about my work with feigned interest, and never mention the wine again. The contrast between her actions around me and the stories she told Sarah was terrifying. I felt like I was going crazy. I started second-guessing every interaction I had with her, wondering what innocent comment would be twisted and reported later. The trust between me and Sarah was developing hairline fractures, and I felt powerless to stop it. The next big lie was a masterpiece. Sarah had a beautiful vintage vase that belonged to her late grandmother. It was her most cherished possession. It sat on a high, stable shelf in the living room. One Tuesday, I was vacuuming. I moved the coffee table, and as I pulled the vacuum back, the hose gently bumped the leg of the shelf. I saw the vase wobble. My heart shot into my throat. I lunged and caught it before it even came close to falling. I held it, my hands shaking, placed it safely on the couch, and decided to dust that shelf properly since I was already there. Crisis averted. Or so I thought. That weekend, Carol was over. She looked at the shelf and said, "Oh, you moved the vase! It looks lovely there." She said it so innocently. Later, I was in the garage when I heard Sarah call my name. Her voice had a tremor I'd never heard before. I walked inside to find her holding the vase, tears in her eyes. Carol stood beside her, arm around her, with a look of profound disappointment aimed directly at me. Sarah asked, "Is it true? Did you almost break Nana's vase and just put it back without telling me?" Carol chimed in, her voice dripping with fake sympathy. "Now, Sarah, I'm sure he was going to tell you. He probably just forgot. When I noticed it was moved, it all came back to me. I saw him knock the shelf the other day from the window when I was dropping off the mail." I didn't want to say anything. I was speechless. She'd been watching me. She saw me save the vase and spun it into this. I sputtered my version, but the evidence seemed to support her. The vase was moved. She had seen me. My protestations just made me look guilty and defensive. The look of betrayal on Sarah's face shattered me. That was the day the real wall went up between us. The heirloom incident broke something in me. The shock and white-hot anger I felt that night slowly curdled into a deep, profound sadness. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, listening to Sarah's quiet breathing beside me, and feel a million miles away. This woman, my wife, the person who was supposed to be my partner, now saw me as some careless, dishonest guy who hid things from her. And it was all because of this narrative her mother was feeding her, bite by poisonous bite. The anger was easier. I'd fantasize about yelling, about exposing Carol in some grand way. But the sadness was heavier. It was the acceptance that this was my life now. I was losing. My marriage was being dismantled from the inside by a smiling, baking, concerned-looking saboteur, and I had no proof to fight back with. I started to withdraw. I stopped trying to defend myself because it only made me look guiltier. I just went to work, came home, and existed in this quiet, lonely bubble in my own house. I was mourning my marriage while I was still technically in it. The final nail in the coffin was so stupid, so utterly mundane, that it was almost funny. Our anniversary was coming up. I'd planned a surprise weekend getaway to this little inn Sarah had always wanted to visit. I'd booked it months in advance. I was hoping it could be a reset for us. I made the mistake of mentioning my excitement to a buddy at work over a coffee break. Somehow, Carol found out. I have no idea how. Maybe she'd called my office and his line picked up, maybe it was just horrific luck. But she called Sarah that afternoon. I came home to find Sarah sitting at the kitchen table, her face pale. She didn't say hello. She just said, "My mom ran into your colleague, Mark, at the grocery store. He mentioned how excited you were for your guys' weekend coming up. Your anniversary weekend." I felt the world drop out from under me. The lie was so perfectly crafted. It positioned me as a liar who would blow off our anniversary for a trip with friends. My surprise, my desperate attempt to save us, was now proof I didn't care. I showed her the hotel confirmation emails, the receipts. I called Mark on speakerphone, who was utterly confused and denied ever seeing Carol at a store. But it didn't matter. Sarah just looked at me with this hollow, exhausted expression. "I don't know what to believe anymore," she whispered. "I just can't live like this." The trust was completely gone. She asked me to sleep in the guest room that night. I knew it was over. Carol had finally, completely, won. The separation was quiet and brutal. Sarah moved in with Carol. Temporarily. But we both knew it was permanent. The divorce papers showed up a month later. I was devastated, a hollowed-out shell of myself. I'd lost my wife, my home, and a chunk of my future. All my anger had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard lump of resolve. I wasn't sad anymore. I was focused. Carol had taken everything from me with her lies. I wasn't going to yell or scream. I decided I would give her exactly what she deserved. I would use her own weapon against her. I would tell the truth. The whole, unvarnished, embarrassing truth. Not to Sarah, it was too late for that. But to everyone else. My revenge wasn't violent or illegal. It was meticulous. I sat down and started a journal. I wrote down every single incident I could remember, starting from the wilted plant. I noted the date, what actually happened, and the twisted version Carol had fed to Sarah. I dug through old text messages, emails, and calendar entries to find corroborating evidence. I listed the witnesses she'd sometimes invent, like my coworker Mark. I wrote down how each event made me feel and how it chipped away at my marriage. It was my ledger of her lies. It was no longer my word against hers. It was my documented history against her fiction. This wasn't for a court of law. It was for the court of public opinion, her family, her friends, her community. My first move was strategic. Carol is a pillar of her church community, always organizing bake sales and charity drives. The annual church picnic was coming up, a huge event where she's always the center of attention, basking in her reputation as a selfless, kind-hearted woman. I knew I had to be there. I put on my best shirt, the one Sarah always liked, and I went. I saw Carol holding court at a picnic table, surrounded by her friends. She saw me, and her smile tightened. She probably expected a scene. I didn't give her one. I walked over, calm and polite. I said hello to everyone. Then I looked directly at her and said, in a voice just loud enough for the table to hear, "Hello, Carol. It's good to see you. I'm still so sorry about that red wine spilling on your blouse at our dinner. I never did get that stain out of our tablecloth, but I hope you're sure it was okay." Her face went blank for a second, then she forced a smile. "Oh, that old thing?" "It was nothing, dear. But the seed was planted." It was a neutral, innocent-sounding statement that directly contradicted the story of my anger. She'd undoubtedly told her friends. I saw a few curious glances exchanged. I didn't stay. I just turned, nodded, and walked away. The first stone had been cast. Her perfect image had its first tiny crack. A few days later, I ran into Sarah's aunt, Carol's sister, at the coffee shop. She'd always been kind to me. She looked uncomfortable seeing me. I heard about the circumstances, she said awkwardly. I knew Carol's version had already been delivered. I took a breath. Can I tell you my side? Just so you have the whole picture. She hesitated but nodded. I didn't get emotional. I just stated facts. I told her about the plant, the wine, the vase, the anniversary trip. I didn't call Carol a liar. I just presented the two conflicting versions of events and showed her the dates in my phone's calendar that proved my whereabouts during the anniversary trip. Lie, I said. I loved Sarah more than anything. I would never have done anything to hurt her. I just lost her to a story I wasn't telling. Her aunt's face changed from pity to dawning horror. She knew Carol's competitive nature, her need to be the center of her daughter's world. The dominoes were starting to fall. The truth was beginning its quiet, relentless march through Carol's inner circle. The big moment came at a family birthday party for one of Sarah's cousins. Both sides of the family were there. Carol was in her element. I arrived, and the room got quiet. Sarah looked shocked to see me. Carol's smile was a brittle, frightened thing. I didn't address the room. I walked right up to Carol. I kept my voice low, calm, but clear. People leaned in to listen. Carol, I said, I'm not here to fight. I just want to understand. Why the vase? Why tell Sarah I almost broke her grandmother's vase and hid it? You saw me catch it. You saw me save it. Her face flushed deep red. I don't know what you're talking about, she stammered, her voice losing its usual sweet tone. And my anniversary surprise? The guy's weekend? You never saw Mark at the store. You called my office. She sputtered, looking around for support. This is nonsense. You're trying to turn everyone against me because you're angry Sarah left you. That's when I did it. I didn't yell. I just pulled out my phone. I have a timeline here. I said not to her, but to the family members now watching, utterly rapt. Dates, times, the lies she told Sarah, and the proof that they were lies. I've already shown it to a few people. I'm happy to show anyone else who wants to see the kind of campaign that ended my marriage. The silence was absolute. The look of utter panic on Carol's face, the dawning realization on the faces of her family. It was everything. I had backed her into a corner with nothing but the truth, and she had no defense. The kind, unobtrusive facade finally crumbled away in front of everyone, revealing the bitter woman beneath. I left the party immediately after. I didn't need to see the fallout. I could imagine it. The phone calls, the hushed conversations, the painful reassessment of every story Carol had ever told. I heard through the grapevine that Sarah had a massive fight with her mother that night. She finally saw the pattern, the web of lies that had cost her her marriage. It was too late for us, the damage was too deep, but Carol's victory was, Chady thoroughly, hollowed out. Her greatest weapon, her reputation, was shattered among the people whose opinion she valued most. She was exposed, not as a concerned mother, but as a manipulator who destroyed her daughter's happiness out of jealousy and possessiveness. My revenge wasn't about getting Sarah back. It was about ensuring Carol had to live in the reality she created, surrounded by people who now looked at her with doubt and pity instead of admiration. She was alone with the truth. So, that's my story. It's been a year now. The divorce is final. Sarah and I don't talk, though I heard from a mutual friend that she started seeing a therapist and is trying to rebuild her relationship with her mom, albeit with very, very strong boundaries. I'm not sure I could ever do that. What did I learn? First, document everything. If something feels off, write it down with dates and details. It feels paranoid, but it's your only defense against a skilled liar. Second, communicate with your partner early and often, even when it's hard. Don't let a third party become the primary narrator of your relationship. And finally, the best revenge isn't about violence or screaming matches. It's about living well and, when the time is right, calmly and relentlessly exposing the truth. It doesn't fix the pain, but it prevents the person who hurt you from rewriting history. It takes away their power. My peace now comes from knowing I finally told my side. I'm moving on, and I'm gonna be okay. If you're in a situation that feels even a little bit like mine, don't ignore those little cracks. Address them immediately. Because before you know it, the whole foundation can crumble. Thanks for listening.